whole world has disappeared. Nobody talks in that manner. There is a model now that says that the same brain networks are engaged for language reception and language production, because language production mimics what you receive, because we already have a feedback. If I do an experiment where I don't allow you feedback of your own voice, you will not be able to speak, or I do delayed feedback. So language production and language comprehension should not be viewed as two very distinct processes, but rather different manifestations of the same neural process. Similarly, memory and attentional abilities are used for both. Somebody may say speaking is very attentionally demanding because I have to focus what I need to say, and listening just comes like exogenous cues. Whatever you say, I listen. However, it is not whatever you say, I may listen, I may look like, but I have not comprehended. Unless until it is with regard to my goals, is not it? Otherwise at the end of the day, I would memorize a million things. I do not. I only pay attention that is corresponding to my goal. So endogenous and exogenous components of attention are always dynamically at work for all these various cognitive skills. I think speech and hearing professionals today are definitely attentive, and many of them are excellent researchers. I know many of my colleagues in this area. They are practitioners, but they are researchers as well. So the view today is more integrative, is more multidimensional, is not classificatory, is rather more qualitative, more embodied, trying to understand the client with regard to his environment. Where does he stay? Does he stay in a suburban? Does he stay in a village? Does he stay in a multilingual setup? Does he come from? The embodied approach to cognition is very important, trying to understand the individual with regard to his environment. What kind of parents it has. Are they talking or are they not talking? I see in a city like this or in other such cities where parents leave the children over a period of time in a day crèche or a night crèche even. Because some of them, the software professionals, they have to work in the night. They come in the night and they leave the morning, they come and take the child. You can imagine. I need not elaborate. So this embodied aspect is never consulted or is not even talked about. We behave in clinic as if everything is fine, only this thing is bad. So all I am trying to say is that a holistic, integrated approach with modern accounts of modern theories is essential, and particularly cognitive scientists can play a major role because it is their everyday business to understand mentality, and they have the scientific and the theoretical enterprise, and researchers that are in application areas should collaborate more to try and understand and help one another more. We do studies on patients, but we do not do to develop a particular training program. We publish it and we think that somebody may read and somebody may come up with a suggestion. So, I do not know how far I could do justice to attention and memory, but I think these are such vast topics. You can speak on any aspect of them and for days you can go on. I was trying to really suggest as an experience of my own as a scientist who has gone through these various disciplines and who finds more integrative and more commonalities across frameworks rather than these deep divisions. So it is important to understand that a person's so-called linguistic ability, my final point, is not just linguistic. This is an outcome of a complex mixture of things, and many of them have nothing to do with language per se. And many of them are just cognitive, just sensory, just perceptual, just decision making. Because we do not know that decision making areas of the brain are involved all the times when we plan to speak. We always thought speaking comes so naturally to us. I am so perfect all the time. This last 1 hour I have spoken, and I have spoken well. I have not abused anyone. I have not spoken a bad word, or I have had full control. And I go, how could I achieve that? How could my brain achieve that? Because if you would have been doing a brain imaging on me, you would have found out the same area that helps me to select stuff in the market, my decision-making area, the area that edits, the area that monitors was active during my speaking. So, with regard to the brain, there is no big compartmentalization. The neurons treat stimuli similarly. It is with regard to the frequency and the expertise that things change. So, I think that is all for today, and I believe that I have said something that will be of use to all of you, and I would like to have any feedback or any comments or suggestions. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? 2 questions allowed. We are running short of time.
So we have some goals, so we make working memory, but when we go to the autistic child or genius child, we don't have goal. Cognition is affected. So for him, how we can set the goal and how we have to make his working memory to work.
Well, talking about working memory specifically for autism, I am not quite sure, because first of all they need to be a little bit focused, because most of the time they are distracted or they are ritualistic. So they are definitely focusing when they are doing ritualistically their behavior. They are focusing on it. You cannot say they don't have attention. What you want is to turn that capacity to something else that you want them to do. And now in America, I think the culture is changing. They are not forcing people to learn all these things that normal, so-called normal children are trying to do. So things are changing now. So I would not say, with regard to autism, I cannot recommend what you should do for the particular case, but it's not that clear to me. Because autism research today actually is a bit, stands at a confused. Earlier it was affective emotional disorder, now it is accepted that it is another way of behaving in the world, and so this has opened up a big Pandora's box. If you think it's another way of behaving in the world, the person is not harming anyone or myself, just I minimize, and he lives a full life. What is the problem? So I am not, I cannot say how you can give somebody a goal, because as far as my theoretical understanding, it must come from the agent himself. So the environment must be curated so that the agent finds its goals. Like, imagine, we talk about literacy in this country. How many people have books in their house where their children can even look, can touch them? And there's a big correlation. Just having books, I'm not saying as soap pieces, but somebody else reading, having, touching, and then doing this. So you create a sensory atmosphere. Then the child finds a goal. As simple as that. The child does it and keeps doing it.
That's excellent point.
So it's not one day with father comes, oh, I have a 4-year-old, I have purchased a book, read it now. Doesn't work. Are we creating the right sensory environment so that the agents find their goals themselves and that become their habit and effortlessness grows? We always think of tuition master aa jayega aur padha lega. We keep hearing about it. So those people succeed, and these are the things that naturally should grow. So most of the time I was in Finland, I remember just last one experience. I was participating in a autism training. I went to a clinic. They have a different approach altogether. There is no special, regimental training for 1 hour or, there are various rooms these children are playing and they are just themselves. But they are just guarding them. And there is no such thing like, if a child shows a talent for painting, they are given free. Okay, you paint more and more. And nobody tells them this is watercolor, that is this color. Somebody else is doing and they mimic first, as is the nature of human mind. And some of them are doing well. There is no force. There is no such thing. So probably that was one way to what I am saying, creating the right sensory environment. So you bring in a child comes to this clinic. You see what sensory environment is there. You have only exogenous cues. But do you have powerful exogenous cues that could also lead to internal engagement of attention? That is the point. Exogenous cues should be powerful, should be stable enough so that they engage with those cues. You need not do anything. Just be there. But I do not know how practically this, I may sound like a mystic, but I think most of the things are now in practice. In Russia, things are different. In the US, things are different. So there is a whole culture specificness to this whole training part of the business. It cannot be overlooked. There is whole culture expectancy is there. Their expectancies are different. Our expectancies are different with regard to diseases and disorder, and our involvement is different. So I think most of you must be addressing these issues, and it's not that simple. One last question.
Last question we have. Okay.
Sir, you have said that aphasia it is not classificatory. So, like we are diagnosing in a clinical setup. So, how do we then diagnose it, sir? We are diagnosing.
I will not comment what you should do in a clinic. When I look at the brain, I don't see that there is any big difference. The same stimuli, different stimuli, the same brain area is vibrating. I don't know, things will change maybe after 10 years. Yeah, but the essential criteria are not going to change. Aphasia definitely results into some form of language impairment. And some type of aphasia are more phonological, some are more semantic, all that is going to be there. But I see you look at the classifications, the big chart, and you ask how this chart has come up. Who has created it on this? So what kind of evidence? He might have just found out two postmortem brains in some morgue 8 years ago. But today we have data of hundreds and hundreds of people, brain imaging data. Is not that data going to be influential in telling me what kind of diagnosis should I make rather than these two postmortem brains data? So textbooks need to be modified. Anyway, I think people are doing that. It is coming. So I am not
at the lower level of education. See, first we begin with the classification so that they will understand the basic nuances of classification is done. So once we grow up in our acquiring the knowledge, then these will just erase.
It's all again same. The way I am speaking here, if I speak on the street, if I would not have been a professor in a prestigious university, things would have been different. The same people would have looked at me differently. Culture, expectation. Our brains and behaviors are formed as part of expectation. Our fellow people. And we always make this suggestion that now he has improved. Just by I brought him to this clinic for last 6 months, I also kept he has improved. Empirically, what has improved? But we definitely, 5 people agree he has improved, he has passes, give a certificate. So I think these components are often overlooked. And this though cannot be brought down to a level of ticking boxes, but they are coming in a big way. Because today we are asking parents in ICD-10, this is a practical example. In ICD-10, which is used to diagnose autism, right? You are aware of that? DSM-5, ICD-10. Today, in ICD-10, their parents are asked to give a subjective evaluation. Not just, does he talk, does he produce more verbs, but subjective evaluation. What kind of television programs he likes to see. Even in cartoon, there are 25 types of cartoons. Some are more this, some are more that, all of you can see. And children are tuned to such things. Is not that affecting their liking and disliking because of this changing nature of stimuli. So subjectivity has entered and embodiment has entered. People are talking more about the environment. People are talking about more of the involvement of the caregiver as part of the environment. And all of you know this whole relationship, the environment, the therapist and the person who receives therapy. So my point was from a theoretician's perspective, and I restrict it to that. And I will not say that tomorrow, if I myself have some problem and I come here and you tell me, no, that cannot be a diagnosis because we anyway, thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra. I know the way you linked attention, memory, and also to our speech and hearing disorders was excellent. I request our section in charge, the GDM Hari Prasad Garu, to kindly give a bouquet to Dr. Mishra. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed speaking, and I hope to see all of you again sometimes. Or you can come to the university, to the center, and learn more.
Now we'll have a talk by Dr. Praveen Kumar. He's a neurologist.